We're paying out now over $5 million a day. If we make everyone twice as productive or even 5 times as productive over the next few years, that will mean that there's more jobs than any other time in history.
On this episode of High Conviction, I sit down with Brendan Foody, the co-founder and CEO of Mercor. In just 3 years, Mercor has become one of the fastest growing companies in the world, now valued at $10 billion. Mercor builds the data layer that frontier labs depend on and has become one of the most important businesses in the AI stack. On this episode, Brendan and I discuss how Mercor trains the world's best AI models, the way knowledge work will evolve over the next few years, and whether AI will displace humans or create more opportunities than before. Without further ado, my conversation with Mercor co-founder and CEO, Brendan Foody.
Thanks so much for taking the time, Brendan.
Of course.
You've said the labor market is the largest, most inefficient market in the world. And most people know Mercor as the company that helps AI labs train their models. But you've written that you're really trying to solve a much older problem, how talent gets matched to opportunity. So before we talk about Mercor, what is it about the labor market that makes it so inefficient? And why do human capability and opportunity so often fail to find each other?
The most inefficient thing about the labor market is that it's entirely disaggregated. Like when you're looking for jobs, you apply to a couple dozen jobs. And when a company is hiring people, they can only consider a fraction of a percent of candidates in the market because everyone has to review resumes manually. They have to have conversations to see who's a good fit, and they have to manually decide who to hire. And it feels like building this central platform, this aggregator for organizing human intelligence in the economy is one of the most important things to make the knowledge work market more efficient and just solve the most important problem for everyone of what they want to do every day.
And I guess there's a tendency to think that as models get better and smarter, human input matters less. But Mercor's kind of built on the opposite premise, right?
Totally.
The bottleneck is finding humans who can do the things that the models can't. It's the kind of ultimate matching problem, identifying the people anywhere in the world with the expertise to drive the frontier forward. So when a lab comes to Mercor seeking to improve a model in a specific vertical, walk us through what actually happens and what the experts are doing and how they ultimately work to make the model better.
So a lab would come to us and say they want to be the best lab at finance. And so we break down surveying a bunch of experts across all the different domains in finance, ranging from investment banking to FP&A to accounting to the long tail of functions within a finance department within a company. And then we have them create the distribution of what are all the things they spend time on, what are the different tasks they do, whether building a financial model or analyzing quarterly statements or looking at the accounting treatment of a specific thing. And they create the prompts and rubrics similar to how a professor would create a rubric to grade an exam, to score how effectively a model is able to automate that specific task corresponding to that part of a job or domain. And the bottleneck to Claude or ChatGPT automating everything that you can do on your laptop is how do we cover the full distribution of all of the environments, so all the different apps and context, and all of the tasks, prompts, and rubrics that correspond to everything you would want to use those models for. And so it's this enormous build out that is currently mobilizing hundreds of thousands of people that we're hiring soon many millions to transform the labor market dramatically.
And to unpack the selection side, you've said before the real signal is performance data, how someone actually does on the job. But before that, first time someone onboards with Mercor, what is the strongest proxy at that stage when you kind of have no pre-existing data to work off?
So generally, there's of course the resume as sort of some surface level data, and then we do an AI interview on the candidate where we've done over 7 million AI interviews now, and we built the first AI interviewer right after GPT-4 came out in April of 2023 while we were still in college. And so it's come a long way since, but it has full context on the candidate's resume. It's able to ask them dynamic questions contextual to the role it's interviewing them for, and then ultimately help to make a recommendation for our team to figure out who are the people that we should be onboarding to projects.
And when you're evaluating how the expert performs in a task, does that feedback come directly from the labs, or do you have kind of internal metrics that track that? How do you actually evaluate the performance of an expert on a specific task?
We have a lot of internal metrics for that. Sometimes we also get feedback from the labs, but it's generally two things that would be most helpful. The first is that we would have peer review of other experts on the project that look at their task and say, is this good or is this bad? And what percent of their tasks have pass versus are defective. The second thing is we would have what we call agentic QC, where we have an agent review their task based on a set of quality criteria and determine what is the defect rate, is this a good task or a bad task.
And of the few 100,000 people in the network, is the work concentrated in a small group within that, or is it kind of spread out across the long tail?
Very spread out. So for reference, there's, call it 5 million people actively looking for work at any given time. We're hiring over 10,000 people a week, wow. And it's hundreds of thousands of people at any given time. We're paying out now over $5 million a day, and so it's come a long way from almost nothing 2 years ago.
And so you said the customers in a previous interview, I think there was the Harry Stebbings interview, that customers aren't just only hiring talent, they're buying completed work. So what's the full stack Mercor is providing beyond the talent itself?
Totally.
What's the customer getting?
So our customers buy something called an RL environment, which includes the clones of apps. So think a clone of Google Drive or Google Docs, Google Sheets. We call the world, which is all the content within those apps. So slides, docs, Excel sheets, messages, emails, etc. And then also the tasks, which are the prompt and rubric that I was describing earlier. And we basically will hire the tens of thousands of experts for a given customer, create the platform that they work on to create all of this data. We have some human project managers, some AI project managers to help manage their time to make sure that they're producing really high quality work product. And then we provide that to customers, generally charging per task.
You've spoken about how the economy is becoming an RL environment machine. So widening out from Mercor to the broader economy, if that's where we're headed, what does knowledge work look like in, say, 5 years' time?
Well, my thesis is that there's so many redundant and repetitive things that people do every day where they need to manually redline a legal contract in the same way, or redundantly build financial models in a way that they've done hundreds of times, or redundantly respond to customer support tickets. And I think in the future, people will spend their time training agents how to automate these menial or redundant repetitive tasks that they do every day. So they'll train an agent how to do the red lines, how to build the financial model, how to respond to the customer support tickets, and free their time up for the higher leverage things where they're managing the agents, they're interacting with their peers, they're interfacing with customers, all these different things. And I don't think we'll run out of things to do. Like, I think if we make everyone twice as productive or even 5 times as productive over the next few years, that will mean that there's more jobs than any other time in history. Like, one interesting stat on that is that we've made humans 25x more productive over the last 200 years, since 1800. In that time period, it's equivalent to automating 96% of someone's job. Yet there are more jobs than any other time in history, because as we've made people more productive, we've just accomplished more as a society.
And I want to sort of go back to Mercor for a second, and because you mentioned how essentially it's more efficient to train an agent to do a task once than it is to do it repetitively, like thousands of times. So I want to know how Mercor specifically is using agents to improve workflows, and where you see other large companies, what part of the workforce goes agentic first?
We're using agents everywhere. We spend more on inference than we spend on employee salaries now.
And that's a lot, right?
That's a lot, yeah. Instead of having humans manually conduct the 7 million interviews we've done, we have our agent that's conducting the interviews. Instead of having humans rank those candidates, we have an agent that's ranking those candidates and the evals corresponding to that. Instead of having humans manage all the projects end to end, we have our AI project manager that just completed its own human data project managing over 100 people, where it had good reviews from all of the experts and completed a full deliverable over a multi-week time period. And so we have these agents deployed throughout the company. We have the eval sets or tasks corresponding to each of those so that we can improve them and know that they're being successful. And I would say that the things that get automated first generally are the most repetitive tasks. It has a very high correlation with the jobs that employees don't enjoy. Like, our employees hate doing menial, low leverage work that they find is mind-numbing, and they don't get to be creative or operate at these higher levels of abstraction. Those are the exact tasks that we found we've been able to automate the fastest.
And if knowledge work increasingly converges on training agents rather than doing the work yourself, what does that do to the distribution of value? Because as models keep improving, the bar for generating useful signal keeps rising, right?
Yeah.
The person you can push to the frontier, maybe move from like a smart graduate at like LSE, for instance, to maybe a PhD, to someone who's like one of maybe a few in the world who can do what they do. Does AI ultimately concentrate value into a smaller and smaller group of people, or do new layers of work keep emerging to kind of absorb everyone else?
It's interesting. People used to have this concern with mathematics when they saw that we were going from undergrad level math to PhD level math to Olympiad math, and they was thinking, oh, maybe it's Fields medals next, and we're going to run out of people that can contribute. But ultimately, what we realized was that there's a very jagged frontier of model capabilities, and the ability of someone to contribute to training an agent is determined by the amount of things that that person can do that the agent can't do across either the digital world or the physical world. And so this could include teaching an agent how to join a Google meeting with us and have a conversation in a persuasive way. It could include how an agent completes a deliverable interacting with multiple colleagues over a multi-week time period. It could even include, we're building evals for how well agents can come up with scientific experiments and run them in wet labs. And these are all things that the models are horrible at. And I don't expect them to be great at any of those anytime soon. And I think we're a very long way from living in an economy where AI is better than humans at absolutely every task, and humans aren't able to contribute.
It's funny because Satya Nadella wrote this fantastic note on Twitter. I think you reposted it as well, right? He was saying a similar thing, right? This kind of tacit knowledge in the economy that is kind of not necessarily tangible or hard to track.
Well, and I'll give you an example is like I have an agent that goes through and helps me draft my emails and Slack messages, or at least I try to do this. And you would think it's not a wildly complex task when I give Opus 4.8 or Fable access to all of my Slack history and all of my Google Drive and emails, et cetera. But the model's really horrible at this. Like it gets it wrong over 90% of the time. And ultimately I had to turn it off because it slowed me down more than anything else. And the thing I realized was so much of it just came down to this tacit knowledge, like the things that live in my head from all of the interactions with peers over the last few years that the model doesn't have context over. And so I think that in every organization, to make these models productive, it will require translating the information from people's heads into a format that agents are able to access. And humans will continue to play a very meaningful part in working alongside agents for an extremely long time.
A lot of our listeners are kind of graduates or students who are still in college, and they're trying to figure out where these sort of domains will be in the next few years. What would be your advice to ambitious college graduates? What should they be optimizing for in the next decade?
The thing I found is the largest correlation with people who go on to do great things or have good jobs in this new economy is those that are obsessed with the technology and finding its limits. Like people that are just using ChatGPT or Claude Code every day and building different apps, understanding what is it able to do, where does it fail, and how do they best gain leverage from the technology. And that is not only the profile of people that we want to hire as experts in our talent network, but it's also the profile of people we want to hire as full-time employees, because those are the individuals that are able to gain the most leverage and get the most done.
And I want to focus now a bit on the eval side and Apex. I wanted to kind of understand what was the kind of catalyst for Apex, and in terms of what was broken about the existing benchmarks. You've got GPQA, Humanities Last Exam, Olympiad Math. What did you see that was fundamentally flawed about those benchmarks and how Apex can add value?
We were looking at the tasks in Olympiad Math, GPQA, Humanities Last Exam, all these very academic tasks. And the labs were complaining to us, like, how come enterprises aren't using our product, or how come consumers don't find this as interesting as ChatGPT? And it was clear it was because there was this huge disconnect between all of the academic benchmarks that everyone was hill climbing and focused on versus the actual outcomes that enterprises and consumers care about. If we want models that are able to automate building a financial model or writing code for us or helping us plan a trip for travel in a consumer context. And so those are the things that we need to build evals for in the economy. And that was what catalyzed Apex, the AI Productivity Index, where we basically went across all of the top knowledge work categories where we see demand from our customers, and then surveyed hundreds of experts from top firms like Goldman in banking, McKinsey in consulting, Latham & Watkins in big law, to create the distribution of tasks and environments that correspond to everything people do in those jobs. And so that has become the industry standard that most of the labs are looking at to determine how well are their models doing with respect to accomplishing those outcomes.
And you've said before that evals are both the PRD and the sales collateral, right? Like the spec researchers are building towards, but also the scoreboard you market on. If that's true and labs are hill climbing every eval you give them, does Apex eventually get gamed the same way with like benchmarking or Goodhart's law?
This is definitely something we struggle with. And I think the answer is twofold. I think first of all, it's important to make sure that Apex has diversity that mirrors the economy. Right now, we started with just a few domains, right? And that doesn't mirror the entire economy. So we need to cover hundreds of domains, which is what we're building out. And as you can imagine, is a pretty large initiative to have dozens of experts across hundreds of domains building it. The second thing is that we also need to be very thoughtful around having separate data sets that we're releasing for the public and for sort of the scientific credibility of the benchmark versus the ones that we're holding out internally, so that maintains a clear delineation and helps to ensure that labs aren't able to game it or understand what the held out tasks look like, and those are very credible.
And I think even within some of the existing evals they have for specific domains, like law ones, for example, they're kind of very basic tasks, like can it pass the bar?
Yeah.
And I know you're working with Harvey on like developing an eval set there.
Exactly.
Right?
We just worked with them on Lab, their new legal benchmark. And so it's been very cool to see that within US law. But one thing I find so interesting about law is that you need to localize it to every single geography, right? Like just because it's good at American law doesn't mean it's going to be good at British law or at French law, et cetera. And so I think that there's going to need to be enormous localization for all of these legal benchmarks in addition to so many other domains.
You've had the benchmark for 8 months now, right? And what's been the biggest observation you've made on model capability? Where have the biggest changes been made, and where do you anticipate the biggest changes to be made in the next 12 months?
I would say that it really helped to catalyze the labs moving away from thinking about the models as chatbots that just interact in our chat window towards thinking about them as virtual coworkers that pull in all of this context from tools. Like you've probably felt in the models over the last 6 months or so that now they're able to connect with your tools and use that context much more effectively. Apex played an enormous role in helping to make that happen. Even in coding, I find there's this really interesting finding where we can look at the gap between Fable 5 and Opus 4.8 on Apex Suite, the coding benchmark, where it requires pulling in all of the context a software engineer would use outside of the code repository. So think all of the linear tickets, all of the Google Docs, all of the messages and emails around the product that they're building together. And Fable 5 had a 25% jump over the next best model on that Opus 4.8, which was, so it's almost doubled the score of like the Gemini model as a frame of reference. And so you can see that it gives you this visibility into what are the capabilities that the frontier labs are focusing on in a granular level that are most impactful for their users.
So you think the delta will be in software engineering still, or are there other areas, would you say?
Well, I would say that Fable 5 is an incredible model in software engineering, but generally we found that reinforcement learning is becoming so effective that once we can properly eval something, the models can hill climb it very quickly. And so I expect that everyone will have those capabilities fairly soon.
There's the Galileo line, measure what is measurable and make measurable what is not so. But Kant said taste is precisely the thing that resists the rubric. Do you think there are limits to what can be evaluated, especially when it comes to things like taste and art?
It's a good question. We think about this a lot. I think that ultimately, so many things in art or that require taste obviously have some degree of human subjectivity. And so we can't measure that in a clean unit test in the way that we can measure code or checking for a specific number in the way that we would measure success in math. But there are ways that we're able to have, for example, a human look at two outputs and say, which poem is more beautiful or which video is more compelling. And so we can do that kind of stuff. And we're able to start doing a lot of innovation with what we call agentic verifiers, where a human will write out these more open-ended rubric criteria and then allow an agent to use that open-ended rubric criteria to make more of these subjective or squishy delineations. And there's always a little bit of noise the more room you give the agent to make the final decision. But I think that the only way we will make progress in these subjective domains is improving the way that we measure quality.
In fact, I saw yesterday there was a new AI startup that just came out of stealth that was basically focused on this exact issue.
Totally.
So Claude Code launched just over 6 months ago. It feels like there's been this step change, the pace, the demand for compute, the sense that things are compounding faster than expected. In a world moving this quickly, how do you balance reacting to what's happening right now and having a longer vision for where you want Mercor to go?
I think that it's important to have that balance. One heuristic that we found really helpful is thinking through what are the things we know will be valuable to our customers over the next decade that we refer to as our big things, inspired by Amazon, where we know that our customers will always want to have more candidates in our talent network. So we're always investing in that. We know that they'll always want better matching with those experts in the talent network, so we're always investing in that. And we always know that they'll want faster delivery of the data and tasks that we're providing, and so always figuring out what are ways that we can streamline that process and make it more efficient. Obviously, the nuances of the specific work that people are doing are always changing and dynamic with the frontier of AI, and so there are a lot of other investments that we make that we recognize will be constantly evolving.
And you found a market where the vision has created an enormous opportunity, AI training. But is that the destination or still the wedge into something much bigger? The broader problem of how talent and labor get matched. What part of that original vision still feels unfinished?
Well, the original vision remains the same of how do we solve this really important problem of what people do every day and how humans fit into the economy. But what we've come to realize over the last few years is that as AI has improved a lot faster than, frankly, we anticipated, that an enormous portion of the answer to that question is training agents, whether that is as experts in our talent network or full-time employees within a business that don't want to do as many of these repetitive tasks. And so that's what we are very focused on, and it takes a variety of different shapes, but I think that we're most excited about building for how we expect the labor market to look in 10 years rather than how it looked like today or a decade ago.
You started this with two people you've known since you were 14. What have you learned from Adarsh and Surya and from the people you brought on since?
I've learned so much. I mean, I think one is that Adarsh and Surya are phenomenal communicators. Like, they were the winningest speech and debate team in history when they were in high school, winning all three of the major national tournaments and policy debate, the most competitive event. And so they're both extremely compelling and articulate, have just immense clarity of thought. And I feel like I have learned a lot from that.
You seem to be very articulate. So.
Well, I did okay at debate, not as well as them. And so I learned a lot. I would say maybe one other thing is that in a lot of ways, we were all co-captains on the debate team when we were in high school. And I think that felt like a initial co-founding relationship where we were all bought into one another's success, and ultimately it was a team effort, and there were ups and downs, there were stressful moments that we powered through, and that helped to build a lot more endurance in our relationships.
Mercor has experienced unprecedented growth. Even the office here is like really bustling. When you reflect on the last few years, what's been the biggest thing you've changed your mind about as a founder?
I probably took culture for granted when we were very, very early on, because it's easy when it's just Adarsh, Surya, me, and a few of our college friends to ensure that everyone is super bought into the mission and understand what it will take to build this category-defining company. But as we scale to hundreds of people in just the span of a year, right, a year or two at this point, so much of my job is how do we ensure that every new person that joins the team is similarly bought into the mission and understands all the things that we're investing in and the trajectory of the company, et cetera. Because I can't personally spend time with every individual in the company. And so that needs to scale through the other leaders. And so I spend a lot of time thinking about that and how we scale culture effectively.
It's interesting because we sat down with Max Junstrand from Legora a couple months ago, and he said like he's reached a scale that you guys have where you kind of have a few hundred employees. The founder can't really interview the new employees anymore. But his solution to that is onboarding every single employee. They've got probably 10 offices around the world in Stockholm for a few weeks so that everyone kind of experiences the same.
We do this as well, and it helps. But ultimately, culture is so complicated and shaped over the course of years, right? Where it's like, what are the behaviors that you reward, and how do you ensure that all of the managers throughout the company understand what behaviors we reward, et cetera, and there's high consistency in that.
A key idea when you started this was the belief that talent is distributed more widely than opportunity, right? Has there been a moment, a message, a vignette, a person you've met that made the impact of what you built, like feel it in a really tangible way?
I think one person that comes to mind is Harsh, our founding engineer. Harsh grew up in India, and he, didn't come from a lot of money. He was, like as a frame of reference, Harsh, the average person graduating from Harsh's university in India would make about $10,000 a year when they graduate. And now we've of course made many millions of dollars for Harsh. And he's just so incredibly talented, so incredibly hardworking. Yet if we hadn't met and had the opportunity to work together, it's unclear exactly what that trajectory would have taken. And so I think the most exciting thing to me is like, how do we create that opportunity for millions and eventually billions of people all around the world? Because as I'm reflecting on how I spent my life, I think that's the most fulfilling thing possible.
Absolutely, that's really inspiring. And I guess that parlays nicely into my final question. The network's still growing. You're paying out a huge amount to experts around the world. So for anyone listening who might be one of those people, how do they get involved? What are you looking for, and how does someone join?
Go to Mercor.com and you can see lots of the roles that we're hiring for, ranging from software engineers to financial analysts to lawyers to bank tellers and hotel concierges, pretty much every category in the economy. And sign up, take an interview, and we would love to work with them.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks so much for chatting. Awesome. Great conversation.